All right. So we have so really what I wanted to start with is honestly a lot of gratitude. I want to start my day. I want to encourage those jumping in to just get the day started with gratitude. And considering that I just finished celebrating 16 years of marriage on Friday, my huge piece of gratitude is that I have a wife that loves me and appreciates me, and she's my biggest cheerleader, and I am her biggest advocate and her biggest fan. We have three awesome kids, so it's just an easy one for me. The gratitude that I wanted to share is I have an amazing wife. So shout out to her, appreciate her. God has done amazing things through our marriage, and we will continue to just pour into other marriages. So that's my biggest gratitude. And if you want to share one, please feel free to jump in and share one. George or Miss Lisa, you can either type it or share it, whichever you feel compulsed to do on your own will.
Well, I have a similar one. Same for my wife, Adrelis Calzada. We just crossed the 25-year mark anniversary last July. So very appreciative of her time, her love, and patience.
Oh man, for sure.
Absolutely. So we
Yeah,
have
well,
one kid out of the relationship. His name is Sebastian, and just dropped him off at college 2 weeks ago.
oh man,
Right.
how did that feel? That was the first year, right?
Yep, yep. Feels really weird not to have him around. So we're working through that.
Golly, going through that empty nest stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Mm. Mm. So if there's anything you want to share, Miss Lisa, you can type it in or speak it out, whichever you'd like. No pressure.
For me, I am just grateful. I I'm at a milestone in my lifestyle. So at this point, anything that I do without pain, I'm grateful. So yeah, I have a son. I have a son. He's doing very well in acting, and so I'm excited. I'm just excited to finally start a new chapter, and that's my thing for my gratitude.
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate for sharing. Thank you so much. So yeah, that's my thing that I want to get started on this call. So I'm just fresh launching this specific talk called Sowing Seeds in Real Estate. And so what I'm also going to do, I'm going to share it in the comments. I'm going to share links to what I'm talking about. If you can't access the link, I will do my best to get that emailed out to those who weren't able to get that done. Some of these links are HAR links that may be accessible for real estate agents. And may not be accessible if in the event you are not fully licensed yet. So please keep that in mind as you access these links. And then I'll also be utilizing some articles. So I'll be going through all that. Now, the reason I've really wanted to start this call, and I'm going to do it every Monday at this time. So I sent you a registration. If you registered for that for this call, you should get the auto what's it called, the auto notifications every Monday at 10. It can also be put in your calendar, so keep that in mind. Please bookmark it. I would love to have you jump in. So what we're going to really talk about for these calls moving forward is really talking about the industry. What's it doing now, right? I think the biggest talk of the town is the federal interest rate and how that's affecting mortgage rates. They are correlated. It's one doesn't necessarily one imposes its will on the other because that's what banks have to deal with when they go and lend money to someone else, right? So the banks get charged a certain federal funds rate, and then they have to then compensate for that when they go and use their mortgages. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what the current state of the market is with regards to the stats that HAR pushes out. So we're going to look at listing inventory. We're going to look at many of those stats. And then really it's titled, going back to the title, it's called Sowing Seeds in Real Estate. Now, if we look at what a farmer does, right, and considering this season of the year minus real estate, if we look at just the weather, it's been super hot and dry. I'm not sure what your grass looks like right now, but it's dry to the bone. You may even have these like little earth cracks where you could fit a golf ball in. You know, I've seen some grounds like that. Thankfully, that's not my yard. It's not that big, but it is super dry. I definitely see it separating on the sides from the concrete to the grass. I see that gap getting a little larger. So when it comes to sowing seeds in a market like this, I believe there is an easy layover and analogy that we can use as real estate agents and professionals in the industry, that we need to till this ground, that we need to till it. We're going to have to do harder work, right? So if we're farmers, farmers are going to have to till the ground even harder. They're going to have to break through that ground even more. They're going to have to use different machinery that they likely have in their arsenal that they may not have to use in a bit, because the ground is so much harder and it's so much drier. So they're going to have to use more resources, more time, likely just to get the same, if not smaller, yield in the crop. And to be honest, guys, that is us in the real estate world. We are having to till our farm, right? Our book of business, our client base, everybody that we know, like, and care about. We're going to have to call them even more, because we're no longer in the season of real estate, maybe a couple of years ago, where it was almost like the Ruth effect, where she went into Boaz's yard in his field and just caught the extra and was able to sustain herself. That was the market of a few years ago. How many of you know that story of Ruth and Boaz? Yes, kind of. So she she was poor, right? Because her husband died. And then so one of the things back in the day Ruth had the option to do was go into a more prominent figure's farm and just pick up the scraps, pick up the extras. But there was so much extra in this in this farmer named Boaz. He was a super wealthy guy. One of his fields there was just extra that would fall to the sides after his workers would, throw the wheat on the horse, I guess, on the oxen and on those trailers. And whatever was extra, she would pick up. And to be honest, guys, there were many real estate agents that got into the market years ago, right at the turn of COVID. And some of them were a little freaked out, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But many of them found they just needed a license, and they received call after call after call, and they were just picking up business, likely from other real estate agents that have sown seeds into people to get them ready. And so there were many real estate agents. I'm sure many of you may have some of these stories where you picked up business because they told you the story that, hey, that real estate agent I was working with, they're too busy. They don't have time for me. Can you help me? And I'm sure that may have been a story for you. And that, for me, is what I call the Ruth Boaz effect. We just pick up business because someone else was too busy. But the interesting thing is, I want you all on this call to be too busy to some degree. I don't want us to neglect our clients by any means. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm talking about the abundance that Boaz had from his field. And I want us to be that. I want us to be that. But at the same time, what it takes is the awareness of what kind of market we're in. And for me, it is getting more dry. So if you're talking to any real estate professionals, many of them are sharing those stories like, yeah, it's dry out right now. I'm not getting as many listings, especially the top producers in the real estate world. When they were getting maybe 10 listings, 5 to 10 listings a month, maybe they're getting 2 to 5, maybe, within that range, 2 to 5 listings a month this time. And even if they are getting those listings, they're sitting on the market a lot longer than they previously were. You could almost put up anything. You could put up the Fisher Price Playhouse, put it on an empty lot, and that thing probably would have sold for about $200,000, right? I'm sure you saw those memes going out there. And it is definitely not that market anymore. And so I want to switch over and share with you. Let me get that screen share. And so you may have seen this already, or you may not be looking at this on a monthly, but I do believe it's important to look at this constantly, right? How many of you just, in the comments, just like, do the raise hand emoji or the notification little bell, do the raise hand if you get this, and if you look at this and study it, not just like click the link and like, oh, okay, but like you authentically study it and to know some of these numbers. That's what I encourage you to do. So I just posted the link for this. And if you're looking at this, give me a little thumbs up on the screen so I know that you're also catching this. So this is right now what the market is. New listings, they're down. That means new listings that are being added month over month, 10% less, double digit. When there's double digit differences, whether it be a negative or a positive, that's definitely noteworthy. And what we have here is there's only 12,000 listings that hit the market versus last year in 2022, we had 14,000 listings that hit the market. And what we'll also notice, even in 2019, we had more listings hit the market, right? And so that's pre-pandemic numbers. So we have less listings hitting the market than we did pre-pandemic. And I think that's why HAR is also noting. So if you see it right here, they're letting you know that 2019, it was even there were even more listings that hit the market back then. Pending sales. What's interesting though, even though we have less, this is what makes inventory so tight, and this is why it feels so interesting. Why we see more people struggling to find the home, yet homes are sitting on the market, but buyers can't find what they like. There's still more pending listings. What a pending listing is, it's a home that's been put under contract and hasn't closed yet. So for the month, and these are July numbers, right? So this is coming from July because August hasn't posted yet from HAR. So if we're looking at July numbers, there have been dramatically more listings, again, double-digit numbers of more pending listings. This is also likely an effect of the summertime. So that's the seasonality of real estate. So right now there's the cyclical nature of the real estate industry and markets, and we're in a cycle that may have been imposed upon us by COVID. The effects of that are now the federal funds rate and the interest rates kind of imposing its will on the real estate market. But either way, there is a local cyclical nature of the real estate world that happens within the calendar year. So if you've been in the real estate world for a year, 2 years, I would say at least 2 years plus, you will have noticed that during the summer months, there's an uptick in real estate activity. That's because many of the people who have families jump into the real estate market during that time because they want to make the switch with the least amount of disruption to their kids' schedules as possible, which is why we see that uptick in the summertime. And so here we're seeing the uptick of people making their, last minute offers to get ready prior to the start of the school season from August into the fall. And then we'll also see a drop, as you notice, just within this calendar as well. There's a drop, getting to December, right? That's the cyclicality of real estate. But then we're also in a larger season in a macro, right? When we look at the macro, there is a downturn of the real estate market just as a whole. So right now we're just really focusing on year over year trends. So we're looking at just really the seasonality and also the effects of, what's happening in the real estate market, right? So pre-pandemic, we have pending listings 8,000. Last year it was 7,000. And right here again, the dotted line that you see on this chart, that's 2019. So if you notice this chart over here, it says the dotted lines 2019. The gold line or the yellow line, I think gold is probably a better description of that color, 2022. And then the bold one is 2023. And so that's what we're seeing from that market. And then so now we go to active listings. Active listings aren't new listings. These are just the number of listings that are currently on the market. So if we look at that, there's more listings staying on the market from month over month. They're not selling as much, even though we see more listings that are selling month over month, because now here we have just more listings that are just hanging out on the market, right? We have 22,000 listings that are active on the real estate, on the MLS, and then 20,000 from a year ago. And we had dramatically more listings in 2019. So if we thought the market was tight 2019 and 2020, the market is even tighter, even though it feels like it's not, because we hear everybody, myself included, saying not as many people are buying. And that's likely because buyers are, sitting on the sidelines, because many of them, the affordability index is just astronomically different than what their paycheck says they can afford. All right, so closings, we have less closings happening, right? So we have 7,500 that happened this year. Last year in July, we had 8,200 closings, right? Just over 8,200 closings. That's still a negative. That's still a deficit that we're in. And it's still dramatically under what happened in 2019. Okay. And then the showings. And so again, this is this huge, I find so interesting. Like, all these stats don't necessarily add up. People are still actively looking, even though there's less closings. They're just like waiting for something to happen. They're like, okay, well, another thing hit the market and I still don't like it, or I still can't afford that. So they're actively looking, right, guys? So people are actively looking. There's more people looking at homes than 2022 and in 2019. So we got to consider that, right? So we got to consider that when we're out there helping people buy. So there's something clearly keeping them on the sidelines. For me, the one thing I can point to that's the most obvious one is the affordability index. And I believe I had an article on that, but it is it's just different than what it was. And the number one factor impeding their ability to purchase is the affordability index. I mean, excuse me, it's the interest rate. When you were looking at a 3 or a 4%, maybe even a 5% interest rate, now suddenly we're in the sevens. That dramatically affects your ability to afford a home way more than the list price, right? So if a property is 200,000, then goes to 220, that's not going to be the biggest difference, because you're looking at, down payment programs of 1%, 3%, 3.5% FHA, maybe it's 5%, you're doing conventional, or there's so many different programs out there for lower down payments. So if you're looking at, like, for example, a 3% on a $200,000 property, that's a $6,000 down payment, I believe that's right. And then if you look at 253, what is that math? That's like 255, 750, right? 7,500, their down payment. That's not the biggest swing. Maybe they can get there in a couple months worth of savings, but that interest rate dramatically impedes that monthly payment, which is what people are ultimately buying. People like a home, but they're buying a monthly payment, and that interest rate just kicks it out of the water for them. And then, of course, we have views. The views on HAR are dramatically down, so we don't have the looky-loos as much, really, but we have active people walking into houses. And I think this is a bigger stat for me, that people are taking the time from their busy schedule to go walk into a house. And I think for me, this is a more important stat than we do have HAR views, because I'm not sure about you, but I still look at listings, even for myself. I'm like, man, I just want that pool. And so, not as many people are looking and just, doing that couch potato voyeurism like they used to. So that's a consideration there. And open houses, 32,000 open houses were being held last year. So, I mean, all these stats are really just so interesting to consider. So let me see here. Okay, so here we go. Federal funds rate, interest rate. Let me zoom in. Okay, so the federal funds rate, it mirrors a federal funds rate. However, the track of the 10-year yield. So what the banks do is they buy that 10-year yield. They also have to preemptively factor in the cost or what the Fed is going to do. So that's why sometimes we see the interest rates hike up, or maybe even hike down, before anything happens with Jerome Powell, right? Mr. Fed Chair. Right. So Jerome Powell is a Fed chair, and he's the one making a lot of these decisions, and he's targeting a 2% inflation rate. And so because he's targeting that 2% inflation rate, that's happening on I think they evaluate that a monthly and then a quarterly, but they have so many meetings every year, right? They have so many meetings where the federal committee meets every year every so often within the year to decide if they increase the rate or they decrease the rate. And to be honest, guys, there has been no talk whatsoever about them decreasing the rate. So there's a strong likelihood. I mean, we are currently sitting in about 7% interest rates for mortgages, 30-year mortgage. I do believe we may see the 8% interest rate come maybe before the year is over. I'm not sure what's going to happen once election time comes, but I don't know if Jerome Powell necessarily cares. His biggest deal is that he targets that 2%. And so that's really the legacy he wants to leave, is that he help the economy get right back on track. And he wants to be outside and beyond whatever political affiliations, because clearly the real estate market is slowing down because it's federal funds rate. Because again, that's what the banks use to charge each other to borrow and lend money and to sell money to other banks. And then the banks then use that money to lend out to people and, to our clients to help get a mortgage. So these three things that I just shared about the real estate market, the HAR snapshot, that monthly snapshot that they put out, the information about the affordability index, and the information about the federal funds rate, those are the pieces of information where you process that, you internalize that, and memorize some of that information. Those pieces of information is what you need to have conversations with people about today's market. So one of my easiest scripts, when people ask me, hey, so how's the real estate market? And I tell them honestly, I'm like, hey, well, because interest rates are so much higher, it's causing more people to just sit on the sidelines and wait to see what happens. Some are waiting because they can't afford today. And then some are waiting because they're hoping that prices come down. But ironically, if they wait for prices to come down, the big talk is that interest rates are going to continue to increase, which is going to have a bigger impact on your affordability. versus the price of the home. And so when you have context like that in your mind, to have these conversations on a more fluid level that are just so accessible to your vocabulary, right? It just makes for a more confident conversation. And then once people observe that confidence in you, they then consider you that go-to source of real estate information. Use this as sowing your seeds in real estate, because first you need to sow into yourself. You need to sow in information, wisdom, knowledge, equip yourself with information so then you can go out to the market and conquer the territory, right? And so the other pieces of information that I really emphasize during this time is really growing your database, doing everything you can to capitalize on meeting more and more people. Really what I'm trying to say, guys, is taking more names, taking more numbers, taking more email addresses, and all that information, those are seeds that you need to be sharing information with, right? Not a sales call. It's developing relationships. People like you and trust you because of the way you treat them. Once they get very comfortable with you, once that seed gets very comfortable in the ground and it knows it's moist and it's ready to just germinate and seed and take root, that's when you will have that harvest, and that's when you'll have that crop. Everything that we're doing now, to be honest, guys, it may not germinate this season. What you're doing in this real estate season right now, because we're in this transition phase when people were, making offers sight unseen, buying pretty much whatever was on the market in a specific neighborhood. People aren't doing that anymore, right? As you can see from the stats that I shared with you from the HAR snapshot, that monthly snapshot, things are slowing down. There are still more homes that are selling. We still have a low inventory because people who have a home, they don't know where to go, because if they buy anything similar to what they had, they're going to be paying dramatically more. People who sell their home to buy something else, they're going to be paying more money for almost the same thing. So it's just a very tough time for people to rationalize buying something different. What we have to do is really provide that information for them when they're ready to make that decision. You're there and it looks like right timing, but it's not right timing. It's because you were intentional about what you were doing during your time of sowing seeds and watering your database with information that's timely for them in this real estate market.